The government in Iran says it will not attack Israel following a retaliatory strike against the Islamic Republic last Friday. This follows the initial airstrikes from Iran on Israel last weekend. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles and the Foreign Desk. Lisa, could this possibly bring an end to the escalation in the Middle East?
Perhaps. The answer is very hard to calculate here because we're dealing with a rogue regime. So anything is possible and anything is on the table. Obviously, they're building up a sophisticated and significant weapons arsenal for a reason, right? And that reason could be just to flex, as they have been doing for a very long time, and to, again, use their proxies in this shadow war that they have done pretty successfully in intimidating both U.S. assets and Israel in the region. So it could be that this is it, right? They served up the slap on the wrist. Israel served up their slap on the wrist, and now everyone can go back to business as usual, and Iran's regime can continue on with the proxy war. I have said this many times in many interviews. Iran's regime is egotistical, yes, but suicidal, no. So in order to, why would they at this point now escalate again? I think that they get the message across in a more efficient and safer way using their proxies rather than to launch from Iranian soil and then risk getting into an escalated war from Iranian soil. So hopefully we can take them at their word that there will be no actual retaliation from Iranian turf. But I have every reason to believe that this proxy war, it is ongoing, right? Look at Hezbollah, look at Hamas, look at the Houthis. Obviously, it's ongoing. So I think they're going to go back to business as usual.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the United States was not involved in Israel's retaliatory strike in Iran. Lisa, can you explain why that's so very important?
At both times, there are rumors that the United States was privy to the information before the attack when Iran's regime attacked Israel last week, and then this past weekend when we saw, the retaliatory strike from Israel into Iran. We don't know, but we do know that there are behind the scenes conversations with both. And all we know is what we hear from the White House podium. And again, we have seen both and we have seen a pivot. And what do I mean? This is usually what we will see the United States do is line up with our ally Israel in the region. We have seen a bit of distancing in the sense that, they're condemning Israel's retaliations in Gaza in order to recapture the hostages. There have been, condemnations about the IDF. They have told Israel to use restraint. They basically said, you had your attack in Syria against those IRGC commanders. Now they got their hit in. You don't need to retaliate. Just consider it a win since we did get 99% of those missiles blocked. And we know that these conversations happen behind the scenes, and we've talked about the consequences of having those conversations and creating that rift between ourselves and our ally Israel. But now the White House is cleaning its hands of all of this, and there was actually, if you recall, no comment after the retaliation from Israel against into Iranian soil. So I think all three parties want to distance themselves from this narrative. I think what's done is done, and nobody wants this to escalate. So in order to prevent that escalation, the United States, the White House, is taking a step back and creating that distance.
So what are the Islamic Republic's next moves? Continue to fund their proxy wars by supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis?
Look, they're going to continue doing that regardless, and they've been doing it since day one. If you recall, Hezbollah was created as that main proxy of the Iran regime in order to fight its battles and to create that front in expanding its hegemonic endeavors in the region. Right now, Hezbollah is the most well-endowed proxy group of Iran's regime. It has over 100,000, some people cite that number to be much higher, missiles in its arsenal. And that's really the fear, that if Hezbollah should escalate, many people don't know that Hezbollah has already been a part of this war and has here and there been shooting into Israel, into Israel's north. Should Hezbollah get involved in a more meaningful way to escalate and get more significantly involved in Hamas's war, then we're looking at a totally different war, different escalation, a different calculus for Israel. With regards to Iran's regime itself, I think that they're going to leave this narrative alone. They do not want to get involved, I don't think, and don't have an appetite for that kind of escalation with Israel. And I think it was a big surprise to them that the Saudis, the Jordanians, the UK, the US came to Israel's aid to block those missiles, because when push comes to shove, you can say whatever you want from the White House podium in order to get votes. But when it comes to blocking Israel and protecting its national security, the West came to, and the moderate Arab states came to Israel's aid. So I think that was a clear message to Tehran, and that they would go back to what has worked for them, and that is that shadow war, that proxy war that they've been involved in.
Israeli Defense Forces and their officials are warning that the Biden administration could place sanctions on one of the Jewish state's military battalions, Lisa. Reports say the United States is looking to sanction the Netza Yehuda Battalion, a unit that was quite active in the West Bank. Do we know why?
In one word, votes. I think this is, again, another, and we don't know if this is going to happen. This is right now rumored to be true, that the Antony Blinken is spearheading just this symbolic, I would say, but it has far, far reaching consequences to sanction a part of the IDF, which is, Israel's military is the only thing they have right now to protect themselves against many threats that surround them in this ring of fire that Iran's regime has created. So to now, even if it's symbolic, it creates such a distance between ourselves and our ally Israel in the region. I really want to remind everyone, regardless of who's in the White House, regardless of how you feel about the Palestinian people, we all want human rights and peace for everyone involved. But we do want to rid the world of radical terrorism, which is the enemy of all people across the world, especially Palestinians, especially Iranians, especially Afghans, and those who live under these terror regimes. So to now sanction the only front we have, meaning the free world, the West, has in the region that is fighting these threats, is completely backwards, and it shows weakness to our enemies. Regardless of who's in the White House, left, right, or center, our foreign policy, especially against our adversaries, has to be very clear. And in this case, it's completely wishy-washy. And the bottom line, Hal, is that if this is being done for votes, this is not enough for votes in Minnesota and Michigan for those people who want Israel off the map. So these are small concessions to them. These are small pivots to them, but these are huge. They will have huge consequences to Israel and those who support Israel.
The reports coming from the ruling political party of the Palestinian Authority claiming that Hamas has been stealing humanitarian shipments and is responsible for many deaths of aid workers in Gaza. I guess this really shouldn't come as much of a surprise.
No, it doesn't come as a surprise to many of us who've been following this. I think many people here in the West, the leftists and those, I don't know how, if you look at Columbia University, you can just see how this has just been snowballing, and it has an effect of catching people's support, and a lot of people who don't know much about the region have really put their support behind terrorism, not understanding what Hamas is, not understanding the history, not understanding what they do to the Palestinian people, and to hear it from the Palestinian Authority, which you just said. We put it in our daily email as hear it from them. Don't take our word for it. Listen to them. And if the Palestinian Authority is warning us against Hamas, this is not just political competition. These are facts. That the terrorists in Hamas, their main victims are the Palestinian people. They steal their food. They kill them. They kill protesters. Anyone who speaks out against Hamas. This is just a day in the life. And really, to hear it from them, I think is a valuable message that I think more people need to hear.
Lisa, two Iraqi security sources allege that 5 rockets were launched from an Iraqi town towards a U.S. military base in northeastern Syria on Sunday. The attack is the first since February, when Iranian-backed groups in Iraq stopped their attacks against U.S. troops.
Yeah, again, delivering a message. You sided with Israel in blocking our missiles. And here you go. Here's a slap on the wrist for you as well. Look, this is more of the same. I think for anyone who tries to pinkwash the activities, the agenda, the ideology behind Iran's regime, has to look more closely at what they're after and what they want to do. In 1979, when the Ayatollah Khomeini came into power, he said, "We will fight the big Satan and the little Satan." That's the United States and Israel. And they have set their sights on fighting us and killing us. And anyone is game. It's not like if you voted for a certain political party here in the United States, or if you're on the streets of New York City, protesting in favor of Hamas, you're going to be spared. This is an ideology that is so expansive and so hateful, I think there's such a lack of knowledge about this. It's up to the educators and politicians and journalists and anyone who is in that position to shape opinions to really educate the masses about this stuff instead of siding with them.
We talked a little bit about anti-Semitism earlier, Lisa, but it appears as though anti-Semitism continues to rear its ugly head. A Jewish student at Yale was allegedly stabbed in the eye by an anti-Israel protester, and a rabbi at Columbia has told Jewish students to go home for their own safety as pro-Hamas protests intensify.
Imagine that, 2024, and these students cannot be protected. Today, Columbia University called for all students to go home, and there will be classes will be on Zoom for all students. They have told the NYPD not to come onto campus. So they're not protecting the students. And they have told those who can protect those students, law enforcement, to not step foot on campus. So basically, they are part of the problem. This is, I mean, what group, what gender, race, religion would we allow this to happen against? I mean, imagine if this were against African Americans or Asians or, women's rights groups. And it makes no sense. We would never stand by and allow this to happen the way that we have allowed this to happen against the Jewish community. And I tweeted last night that we have failed as a world community. We have failed the Jewish community and have made them to feel alienated in the places where they call home, like Columbia University, like Penn, like Yale. It's horrific. I don't know if you've seen any of the footage out there. It's not about land. It's not about Israel's policies. They are literally burning American flags. They are calling for jihad in the United States. They're calling for burning down of Tel Aviv. They're calling for jihad to take out every single Jew in the world. Again, nothing to do with policy, nothing to do with the map, nothing to do with land. It's just intimidation and pure anti-Semitism.
Shifting gears for just a moment here, Lisa, we keep hearing stories of COVID fraud in many countries around the globe, including right here in Canada. While the U.S. government's watchdog called Judicial Watch says over $2 billion, not million, $2 billion has been lost to fraud and more than $1.4 billion has been seized or forfeited. Apparently around 3,500 people have been charged so far.
Yeah, it's crazy. We knew this was happening at the time, right? And I think a lot of people tried to blow the whistle because we saw this growing out of proportion in so many ways. The hysteria, the hype, the money, all of it. And now, going back, I don't know if you've seen some of the statistics in terms of how far back the children are in terms of their basic elementary education in math and reading because of those COVID years. I mean, look at the money that was spent and fraudulently spent on that recovery. It's kind of bureaucracy gone wild, and I think that it's a lesson. But if you ask me, Hal, would it happen again? Absolutely, it would. I think this is really calling into question the entire system. I think it's very similar to voting. I think that's one of the side effects of that time period. You have mail-in voting, and then that can't be properly tracked as well. So, a lot of the policies that were put into place during that time period, they call for fraud. I mean, they invite loopholes and fraud and cheating, and it's very difficult to correct that. And I think now they're calling people back, but I think it's going to be very difficult to really recover that money.
Now, Lisa, before we let you go, what's the latest with the Donald Trump hush money trial? And let me ask you, how much do you think this trial will really impact his chances during the federal election coming up in November?
No, it's interesting. I feel like this election, regardless of Donald Trump's trial or any of his legal troubles, will be an election either for Donald Trump or against Donald Trump. Those are the two items on the ticket. And that's what we saw in 2020 as well. I think people either love him, and these trials and his legal troubles make them love him more because they feel like he's being unfairly targeted, as many people have done what he has done. Not to say that should let him off the hook, but I'm just saying a lot of people feel that he's being unfairly and excessively targeted. And those who don't like him, this makes them, more fueled not to like him. And I think a lot of people would like to not vote for President Biden, but their feeling of voting against Trump outweighs their feelings of voting against President Biden. So they will vote for the Democrat nominee, who is Biden. It's unfortunate. I think I've heard from so many people here of how can these two people be the best we have to offer in the United States? And they feel as though, they wish they had a better option. There's so many who love Donald Trump and they can't wait for him to get into the White House, if that should be the way this plays out, because of his, his deterrence, foreign policy, the economy. A lot of people really feel as though his 4 years were much safer and better and more fruitful for a lot of Americans. And now they're suffering under this economy. Others are so allergic, for lack of a better word, and are going to vote against him. And it's just never Trumpers to the end, right? So we shall see what will happen. There's going to be a very interesting few months leading up to the election, and we'll have it here for you.
Political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us once again from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.